Lust is not just a fleeting feeling or a harmless desire. It is a powerful and destructive force that Satan uses to lead people away from God. Throughout history, lust has been one of Satan's most effective tools to ensnare and enslave humanity, corrupting the hearts and minds of individuals and ultimately leading them to sin and separation from God. From the very beginning, Satan has been the master of deception, exploiting human weaknesses to achieve his diabolical goals. One of the most insidious ways he does this is through lust. Lust is not merely a natural inclination or a biological urge. It is a spiritual battlefront where Satan attacks our purity, integrity, and relationship with God. He knows that by infiltrating our hearts with lust, he can create a barrier between us and our Creator, causing us to fall into sin and move further away from the path of righteousness. The Bible repeatedly warns us about the dangers of lust and its consequences. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, it says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world." This verse clearly distinguishes lust as something worldly and opposed to God's will. It highlights how lust, along with pride, forms the foundation of sinful behavior that distances us from God. Satan's use of lust is a direct attack on our spiritual well-being. When we give in to lust, we allow Satan to gain a foothold in our lives, leading us down a path of moral decay and spiritual ruin. Lust fuels a cycle of addiction and dissatisfaction, where no amount of indulgence can ever satisfy the cravings it creates. This is because lust is inherently deceitful, promising fulfillment, but delivering emptiness and guilt. The destructive nature of lust is evident in its impact on relationships. Marriages, families, and friendships are often torn apart because of unchecked lust. Adultery, pornography, and other forms of sexual immorality are manifestations of lust that wreak havoc on personal relationships and societal structures. These actions are not just sins against individuals, but are fundamentally rebellions against God's design for human relationships and sexuality. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 28, Jesus teaches, "But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." This profound statement emphasizes that lust is not just about physical actions, but also about the intentions and desires of the heart. Satan exploits these internal battles, knowing that if he can corrupt our thoughts, he can eventually corrupt our actions. The spiritual battle against lust requires vigilance, prayer, and a deep reliance on God's strength. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 11 to 12 instructs us to put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Recognizing lust as a satanic tool helps us understand the gravity of the battle we face and the necessity of seeking God's protection and guidance. Temptation, by its very nature, feels wrong. There's something about temptation that often makes believers feel as if they've sinned. However, temptation itself is not a sin. Being tempted does not mean you have committed a sin. It's entirely possible to be tempted without sinning. Today, we're not discussing temptation. We're focusing on lust. One reason I believe the Bible is the Word of God is that it doesn't portray humans as perfect. If men or women had written it, they would likely have tried to present themselves as flawless. Instead, the Bible shows us that humans, like you and me, struggle with a four-letter word, L-U-S-T, lust. Lust has been a problem for men and women for millennia, even before the Bible was completed. It's a real and pervasive issue. Lust has ruined countless lives. Great men and women alike have fallen victim to this powerful force. Unlike some issues, lust does not diminish with age. It took me some time to realize that aging doesn't make lust disappear. Today we'll explore 3 signs that lust is controlling you. Lust can truly dominate your life, becoming a driving force. It can pull you into situations you know won't end well and hurt everyone around you, including your spouse and children. Lust can change the trajectory of your future. This is not an exaggeration. Lust can control you. As a pastor, I've witnessed the devastating effects of lust. My role involves preaching, counseling, and praying for people, and I've seen firsthand the destruction lust can cause. I've been called to homes at 4 a.m. because a husband, married for less than a year, came home early to find his wife cheating. This betrayal, less than 12 months into the marriage, was caused by a four-letter word, lust. I've counseled young women in their early 20s who had one-night stands with men they barely knew. These encounters often result in a child, and the man, interested only in a fling, wants nothing to do with the mother or the child. This, too, is caused by a four-letter word, L-U-S-T. I have counseled men, big, strong, manly men, who have come to me, prayed, cried, and wept uncontrollably because they ruined their marriages through adultery. Their wives had finally grown tired of their infidelity. The sorrow of a man who has broken his home is profound, and there is so much sorrow in the world caused by a four-letter word, L-U-S-T. Lust is something you and I need to confront and deal with throughout our lives. To the young people out there, especially those under 30, allow me to tell you the truth. Lust will not get better with age. You need to deal with it now. Today we are going to look at 3 signs that lust is controlling you. The first sign is that your eyes are running your life. Lust starts from the eyes. When people lust after something, it didn't just happen, they saw it first. What you see determines what will be in you. Don't say you struggle with lust if you don't filter what you watch on TV and the internet. If you know you struggle with lust, don't watch things that trigger your lustful desires. Don't put yourself in a position to fail. Social media has affected many people, causing them to lust after sexual immorality. Consider this. A man described as perfect in the Bible had a problem with his eyes. Job was a just and righteous man described as perfect, but even he struggled with his eyes. Job chapter 1, verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. This tells me that you and I are not beyond this problem. Better men and women than us have struggled with this issue. Job saw that his eyes were leading him down a path he did not want to follow. Job chapter 31, verse 1. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. Job had to make a covenant with his eyes to overcome his problem. You need to make a commitment like Job to look at the world the way God sees things, to look at sin the way God sees sin, and to look at people the way God sees them. David also allowed lust to consume him when he looked and saw Bathsheba naked from the roof. If David had stopped lust at this stage, if he had not allowed it to progress, he would have avoided the punishment of sinning against God. Make a covenant with your eyes now and do the right thing. I love the Bible because it shows me that even a man like David who messed up is still described as a man after God's own heart. This encourages me in my own life because I have made bad decisions due to lust. If God can use someone like David, he can use someone like me and you. If you have made mistakes because of lust, your life is not over. Don't let Satan beat you down with a standard of perfection you will never attain. All of us have made bad decisions, but it doesn't mean God will throw you away. Learn from your mistakes, repent, and ensure you control your eyes. The second sign that lust is controlling your life is when you fantasize about what you saw. When David saw Bathsheba, his mind must have wandered and fantasized about her. If you begin to fantasize and dwell on what you have seen, know that lust is controlling your life. After your eyes have seen something, if you refuse to dismiss it, it will enter your heart, and you will start thinking about it constantly. A man can notice a beautiful woman without lusting after her or committing adultery in his heart. But when you keep looking and your mind starts to wander to inappropriate places, you have a problem. After David saw Bathsheba, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He allowed lust to control him. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 3. And David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? David sent and inquired about Bathsheba. If he had destroyed lust when he first saw her, or refused to let it grow in his heart, he wouldn't have sent for her. When all you think about is what you have seen, lust has entered your heart, and it will push you to pursue what you saw. Something should never make it past your eyes. If you have allowed something to enter your thoughts, if you are fantasizing about someone or something, you are in danger. You need to destroy lust at this stage. This is the crossroads where you decide whether to fall into sin. Are you craving what you are lusting after? Have you planned how you will get it? Are you moving towards committing adultery or fornication? If so, I encourage you to run. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18. Flee sexual immorality. Don't entertain the situation. Don't flirt with that situation. Remove yourself from it. Even if it means blocking someone, do it. The third sign is that you are taking action based on your lusts. This is the final sign of lust controlling your life. At this point, all you can do is wait for the consequences. When you know what you are doing is wrong but still dive headfirst into it, lust is controlling your life. The result of lust is never good. Some people have destroyed marriages and even ended lives because of lust. They allowed it to grow and consume them. You need to start fighting against lust. Destroy it immediately before it destroys you. If you are lusting after something and planning how to get it, stop before you ruin your life. Lust is dangerous and sinful. Live right and let God be sufficient for you. Acting on lust often leads to a spiral of negative outcomes that can deeply affect not only your life, but also the lives of those around you. When you let lust dictate your actions, you might find yourself engaging in behaviors that are completely out of character, driven solely by a desire that has taken hold of your heart and mind. This can include lying, cheating, or betraying the trust of loved ones. The immediate gratification that comes from acting on lustful desires is fleeting, but the damage it causes can be long-lasting and sometimes irreversible. Consider the story of David and Bathsheba once more. David's inability to control his lust led him to not only commit adultery, but also to orchestrate the death of Bathsheba's husband Uriah in an attempt to cover up his sin. This single act of lust set off a chain reaction of deceit, betrayal, and ultimately severe consequences for David and his kingdom. It's a stark reminder that acting on lustful impulses can lead to far-reaching and devastating repercussions. Furthermore, succumbing to lust can erode your moral and spiritual foundation. Each time you act on these desires, you move further away from the person you aspire to be and the principles you hold dear. This internal conflict can lead to a sense of guilt, shame, and worthlessness, creating a cycle that is difficult to break. It can also hinder your relationship with God, as acting on lust is fundamentally at odds with living a life that is pleasing to Him. To break free from the control of lust, it's crucial to recognize its power and take proactive steps to combat it. This might involve seeking accountability from a trusted friend or mentor, immersing yourself in prayer and scripture, and making deliberate choices to avoid situations that trigger lustful thoughts and behaviors. Remember, God's grace is sufficient, and His strength is made perfect in our weaknesses. By relying on Him and committing to a path of righteousness, you can overcome the destructive force of lust and live a life that honors God. When viewed in light of God's holiness, all sins are fundamentally the same. Whether it is anger or murder, white lies or adultery, every sin results in eternal condemnation. Each sin, regardless of its perceived severity, contradicts the nature and will of an infinite and eternal God, making it deserving of an infinite and eternal punishment. Thus, from this perspective, there is no sin that is worse than another. In this theological sense, no sin is worse than any other, because all sins inherently defy God's righteousness. Every sinner falls short of God's glory. However, when considering the earthly consequences of sins, distinctions can be made. Firstly, sins differ in their earthly repercussions. For example, while both lust and adultery are sinful, adultery typically results in more severe consequences than lustful thoughts. The repercussions of harboring lust in one's heart are not as immediate or impactful as those of committing the physical act of adultery. Similarly, the consequences of covetous thoughts are less severe than the act of theft. Although all sins are wrong, they do not all carry the same weight of penalty or consequence in this life. In this respect, some sins can be considered worse than others. The Bible also highlights sexual sin as having a distinct impact on the sinner. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 18 states, "Flee from sexual immorality." All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. This passage places sexual immorality in a unique category, indicating that it has a direct and profound effect on one's body. This suggests that sexual sins may be viewed as particularly damaging, at least in terms of their earthly consequences. Therefore, while sexual sin may not be the worst sin in a universal sense, it is clear that it carries particularly severe consequences in our earthly lives. While all sin is equal in its capacity to separate us from God and lead to eternal condemnation, there are distinctions in the severity of sins based on their earthly consequences. Sins such as sexual immorality are singled out in Scripture for their unique and particularly harmful effects on the individual. And this dual perspective helps us understand why all sins are grievous in the eyes of God, yet some sins have more immediate and severe repercussions in our earthly experience. The pervasive and destructive nature of sexual sin. We must understand that these sins, pornography, fornication, and adultery, are not merely private matters. They are affronts to the holiness of God, and they carry devastating consequences. Let us examine these sins closely and understand their deep impacts on our lives and spiritual well-being. Pornography, the hidden plague. Firstly, let us examine the sin of pornography. In today's world, this sin has become alarmingly accessible. The statistics are staggering. Over 40 million Americans visit pornographic sites regularly, and the global pornography industry rakes in over $97 billion each year. This widespread consumption is not without consequences. It leads to addiction, which corrupts the mind, weakens the will, and erodes the soul. The destruction of lives. Pornography addiction changes the brain in ways similar to drug addiction, leading to decreased sensitivity to pleasure, increased tolerance requiring more extreme content, and withdrawal symptoms when one tries to quit. This addiction traps individuals in a cycle of sin, drawing them further away from God and His intended path for their lives. The mind becomes enslaved to images and fantasies, making it difficult to form healthy, loving relationships. For relationships, the impact of pornography can be devastating. Marriages crumble under the weight of unrealistic expectations and the objectification of one's spouse. Pornography use has been linked to decreased sexual satisfaction, increased infidelity, and a higher likelihood of divorce. It creates a false reality that no real-life relationship can match, leading to dissatisfaction and frustration. The rise of platforms like OnlyFans has exacerbated these issues. OnlyFans allows users to subscribe to creators who provide explicit content, often of themselves. This model has normalized the commodification of one's body and sexuality, making it seem acceptable, even lucrative, to engage in such activities. This shift has had severe societal implications, particularly for younger generations who see this as a viable career path. OnlyFans has contributed to the blurring of boundaries between personal and public, and the easy monetization of explicit content has led many into a lifestyle that is hard to escape. These platforms offer a unique space where creators can share various forms of media directly with their paying audience. This direct interaction allows some individuals to generate astonishing, life-altering amounts of money. For many, the financial rewards are unprecedented, transforming lives with earnings that can be mind-blowing. The financial success of some creators is undeniable. Stories of individuals earning thousands, even millions monthly, have become more common. This kind of money can lift people out of poverty, pay off debts, and provide a lifestyle that many only dream of. The transformative power of such earnings cannot be overstated. Yet the allure of this money comes at a significant cost. Exposing oneself to the world in such an intimate manner can have profound personal and social implications. The very act of sharing one's body and private life for public consumption can lead to a multitude of issues. Once personal content is out on the internet, it is nearly impossible to retract. The digital footprint left behind can follow individuals throughout their lives. The scriptures caution against the love of money, warning that it is the root of all evil. This adage underscores the inherent danger in pursuing wealth above all else. Jesus himself posed a profound question. What shall it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? This powerful query invites reflection on the true cost of such financial gain. Is it worth compromising one's soul for the sake of monetary success? Turning our attention to the consumers of this content, we see another dimension of the problem. The proliferation of unpaid unholy videos on these platforms has created a pervasive culture of consumption that can be equally damaging. Many individuals, particularly men and women, who might have the potential to be great, find themselves trapped in a cycle of endless consumption. Instead of pursuing their passions, they providing a better life for their families, or making meaningful contributions to the world, they waste countless hours watching these videos. This addiction to unholy content can lead to a significant decline in productivity, creativity, and overall life satisfaction. The potential for greatness is squandered as they remain stuck in a virtual world that offers no real fulfillment. Ultimately, the culture of consuming unholy videos creates a society where potential is wasted and lives are diminished. The men and women who could be leading, innovating, and inspiring others are instead caught in a cycle of addiction and despair. This pervasive issue calls for a collective awakening to the true cost of such consumption, urging individuals to reclaim their lives and focus on what truly matters. The path to fulfillment lies not in the endless pursuit of pleasure, but in the meaningful pursuit of purpose and spiritual well-being. From a spiritual perspective, pornography is a grave sin that separates individuals from God. It corrupts the purity of mind and heart that God desires for his people. Jesus said in Matthew 5, verse 28, "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Pornography fuels lust and draws people away from God's design for sexuality, leading to a deeper spiritual alienation. Next, let us turn our attention to the sin of fornication, sexual intercourse outside of marriage. In our society today, fornication is often celebrated and viewed as a norm. Yet it carries profound consequences. Physically, it increases the risk of diseases and unplanned pregnancies. Emotionally, it leads to feelings of emptiness, guilt, and depression. Without the commitment and security of marriage, individuals often experience turmoil and a lack of fulfillment. Engaging in fornication often leads to a host of personal issues. The emotional aftermath of casual sexual encounters can leave individuals feeling used and unworthy. The bond that is meant to be reserved for the sanctity of marriage is broken, leading to a deeper emotional and spiritual void. This lack of commitment results in unstable relationships and a continuous search for something that fornication can never provide. The societal impact of fornication is equally troubling. It contributes to the breakdown of the family unit, which is the cornerstone of a stable and healthy society. High rates of fornication are correlated with increased rates of single-parent households. The weakening of the family structure has long-term repercussions, including higher crime rates, lower educational achievements, and greater social instability. Fornication also has serious spiritual consequences. It is a sin that directly contradicts God's command to keep sexual relations within the bounds of marriage. Hebrews 13:4 states, "Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral." Fornication defiles the sanctity of the marriage bed and separates individuals from God's blessings and presence. It places a barrier between us and the Lord, hindering our spiritual growth and our ability to fully experience his love and grace. Lastly, we must address the sin of adultery, engaging in sexual relations with someone other than one's spouse. This sin strikes at the very heart of trust and fidelity. It is explicitly condemned in the Ten Commandments. "You shall not commit adultery," Exodus 20:14. Despite this clear mandate, adultery remains a significant problem with far-reaching consequences. The personal and relational damage caused by adultery is immense. It breaks the sacred bond of marriage, leading to feelings of betrayal, hurt, and mistrust. The discovery of an affair often results in the end of the marriage, causing emotional trauma for both partners and any children involved. Adultery undermines the institution of marriage, which is foundational to a stable society. High rates of adultery contribute to the breakdown of families, leading to increased divorce rates and the accompanying social and economic challenges. Children from broken homes often suffer the most, facing emotional and developmental difficulties that can have lasting effects. From a spiritual standpoint, adultery is a grievous sin that deeply offends God. It violates the covenant of marriage, which reflects Christ's relationship with the church. In Malachi 2:14, God speaks of the importance of faithfulness in marriage. The Lord is the witness between you and the wife of your youth. You have been unfaithful to her, though she is your partner, the wife of your marriage covenant. Adultery disrupts this sacred covenant, leading to spiritual estrangement from God. It erodes the foundation of trust and love that God has established for the marital relationship. The prevalence and normalization of these sexual sins in modern society call for an urgent and sober response. We must recognize the severe consequences of pornography, fornication, and adultery. These sins not only harm individuals and relationships, but also weaken the moral fabric of society and separate us from God.